Roy Petitfils is a proud husband and father and lives with his wife, Mindy, and their two sons, Max and Ben, in Youngsville, Louisiana. Roy is a licensed counselor, speaker, consultant, and author who specializes in working with adolescents and young adults. He has worked with youth and young adults for over 20 years as a youth minister, as well as in schools as a professional educator, administrator, and counselor. Roy currently is a therapist in private practice. In addition to his practice and speaking, he has authored popular print and digital resources. Among these are an award-winning, internationally syndicated column for adults, 4 books including his latest, What Teens Want You to Know But Don't Tell You, and a podcast called Today's Teenager. He is also a popular speaker and has keynoted many national and international conferences, including TEDx. So please join me in warmly welcoming Roy Petitfils.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. I don't think I have that thick of a Cajun accent, although I am from the swamp of South Louisiana. Came up from there today. I can turn on my accent and talk like a swamp person if you want, but I'll try not to. I'm so excited to be here. I thank the Newman Center, the Dean of Students, and I know there were several organizations who literally moved heaven and earth. You would not imagine, some of you maybe, the amount of bureaucracy that had to be gone through in order to make this happen. I told my secretary a few months ago that there was a 95% chance that the event wasn't going to happen. And we waited till the last minute to book plane tickets, but a lot of tenacity on the part of Dan and some of the leaders in the Newman Center and other organizations on campus. I'm so pumped to be here and to be with you, talking about such an important topic that really, as you guys know, you wouldn't be here. I mean, we're just a week or two before finals, and you're here on your free time. I'm assuming some of you are getting some extra credit in psychology class, perhaps, maybe. But I know that most of you are here because you're interested in the topic. It's something that has affected someone you know in your life, maybe yourself, something that you just want to be ready for, maybe when it comes up. And so it's so good that we're here. So good that we're here. So just by way of a little more of an introduction, if this actually works. Yeah, I think it does. Good. Oh, no, it's not working. Okay. My name is Petitfils. Again, like I said, I do work with young people. Unfortunately, most people pronounce my last name like this, which is a bit unfortunate when you work with young people for a living. But it is Petitfils. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. This is just to prove that I have hair. It means grandson in French, which is an area, the French area of the country that I'm from. A little more about me. These are my peeps, my family, my wife Mindy, who tells me she's always right. I, of course, am always wrong. Get ready for it, for those of you who are going to enter into committed relationships. My oldest, Max, who just is about to turn 13, and you can tell. And my youngest, Ben, who is 8. So, okay, that's not going to work. So just a little bit about me. You heard it all. I've worked with young people and young adults for a while. Probably the most important thing you need to know about me today is that I do this for a living in terms of, as a counselor. But maybe even more important than that, when I was sitting in a lecture hall like this at 18, 19 years old, I would have I would not have been able to fit in that seat. I weighed 535 pounds. I was severely depressed and had an active suicidal ideation. I flunked out my freshman year of college. I was just so depressed. Like about 37% of young people in America today, I came from a single parent home. Like about 18% of young people in America, I was born in poverty. My mom worked 5 jobs in order to be able to get me an education, a private education, because the schools in my area of Louisiana were so poor. She knew that I would drop out and probably die because I'd get into drugs or because of obesity-related illnesses, which happened to 3 of my 4 first cousins. So she was never around. As a kid, I turned to food as a way of medicating my emotional pain, like loneliness and sadness. And it came to a crashing halt for me, or a realization when I was in 10th grade. I had to go to a butcher shop to weigh on a meat scale because I couldn't weigh on the doctor's scale. Graduated at 535 pounds, was severely depressed. Now again, this is the 1980s. We knew about depression, we just didn't know as much as we know now. There were counselors, but not nearly as available as they are now. It's amazing to me how far we have not come in the last 30 years, though, with reducing the stigma around mental health. We've made so much progress in so many other areas, and we have progressed in mental health, but it's still an area where we're hesitant to be more forthcoming about this arena. Before I get started, in case I forget it, I want you to know depression is not something that I have overcome. It's kind of like if you've ever met anyone in recovery or in a 12-step program, they never say, well, I beat it, right? I am in recovery. I'm still managing my depression. Over the years, I've tried just about everything I'm going to recommend and suggest to you as options. But to this day, I still see a counselor. I still, at times, am in need of psychotropic medication. I've got a huge accountability and support group, and I practice a lot of the things that I'm going to suggest to you. As I stand before you today, I will tell you that about twice a year, I've noticed over the years, in the fall, and right around this time of year, April, for some reason, the most beautiful time of year in Louisiana, I will go into a depression, and boy, the timing was just right. This year, about 3 weeks ago, I just kind of felt it going. So it's something I know intimately well, but something that I've learned how to manage, that at one point in time I thought was going to take my life. And over the years as a minister, I was fortunate. I landed in a Newman center. I landed on a college campus after I flunked out. And there were people who saw through all of my shame, because most people just couldn't even look at me because they were so embarrassed of me. And I had people who saw me, who accepted me, who wanted me around, and who really genuinely helped me and taught me a lot of what I'm going to teach you tonight. And it gave me the courage to begin a very complex process of losing the weight. The weight came off first, but I didn't realize until I lost the weight what the weight was really masking for me, which was some underlying emotional issues, and most probably some inherited genetic neurochemical issues that I believe that I still struggle with. These topics that we're going to talk about tonight are very complex. I love talking to your generation because that doesn't surprise you. I find that your generation, college students right now, grad students, even high school students, have a much greater comfort with complexity. I think that on some level, you've grown up in a world that's complex. You've grown up with media that enables you to experience and to see and even participate in the complexities of life, whether it's political, personal, social, economic, educational. This is no different. It's incredibly, there's no silver bullet. There's not one thing. We're not going to name it all, tonight. This is like trying to eat an elephant in one bite. But thank goodness that we're here tonight to talk about anxiety, depression, and suicide. And those three topics are together because they are connected. Most of the depression that I see today in my practice working with youth and young adults is anxiety-driven depression. Not all of it, but the vast majority of it's anxiety-driven depression. When stress gets to such high levels, and a lot of folks, it can drive depression. When depression gets out of hand, for whatever reason, whatever has caused it, whether it's a genetic cause, medical cause, or an environmental cause, meaning something in your relationships, your home life, or in your social world, it can certainly lead to suicide. The highest suicide rate in the country for youth and young adults is college freshmen right now. It's a staggering statistic. So why are we here? What's the point of coming to a talk? And I apologize because I know that the most effective way to teach and to engage and for us all to learn isn't this big bald speaker in the front of the room, sage on the stage, talking at you. It's much more participative, but we're taking a shot. We're here. We're gonna. It's a start of a conversation, and we're gonna leave ample time at the end for a conversation. But at least my hope would be tonight is that we can name it. You can name it. You can name the symptoms. You can name the warning signs. You can name the risk factors that exist, whether or not there are any warning signs or any symptoms of it. To know that you were at risk. It would have been good for my teachers to know that I was severely at risk, even without the warning signs. And then to own it, for some of us, whether it's for yourself or for someone important to you in your life, to be able to claim it and go, yeah, this is what it is, and yeah, this is real, and this is something I or they're struggling with. And those two things are crucial to taming it. It's really hard to treat something, to address a problem that you haven't articulated in name. When we're able to put language on something, right? The developmental theorist, especially Vygotsky, was one who really contributed to this, said when we're able to name something, to describe it and put language on it, it gives us a sense of control. If you've ever been to the doctor or the university health center, and you're like, I don't know what's going on, and they're like, you're like, I'm about to die. No, you've got the flu. Oh, thank God, it's just the flu. Okay, I thought I maybe had cancer or something like that. No, it's just the flu. Now, the flu can be deadly too. I know that some people I hate that. Don't knock the flu, it's bad. I don't know. Maybe you haven't had the flu, bald guy. And so let's do that. So what's underneath the surface? What's hidden? What's going on? Some of the things that can drive some of these things. Trauma is a huge one. It's important. That word is often misunderstood by many. Because everyone will have an understanding of, for you, what trauma should be, not only for yourself, but for other people, based on your experience and your knowledge. Unfortunately, trauma is in the eye of the beholder. Something that may or may not be traumatic for you may or may not be traumatic for someone else. And so, things that would not maybe have traumatized my generation, we are seeing happening to traumatize experiences that might not have traumatized me are traumatizing people in your generation. Now, to be fair, things that are not traumatizing you are traumatic to my generation and older generations. Certain experiences, I was unmercifully bullied, and it severely affected me in how I looked at life. To this day, I continue to work through the lens of those wounds, even though I've done 20 years of therapy around that. Yet I know people who were bullied really badly, and they did much better around it than I did. So trauma's in that. Trauma's real. Obviously, life experiences, we'll get more into that. Genetics is key. Genetics is so important. And this is an area, our field, psychology is a field, and with all due respect, and look, the research is clear. Wherever there are 15 or more people in a room, there's more knowledge, regardless of who they are, there's more knowledge, wisdom, and experience in that group than there is in any one person. I know for certain that that's true here tonight. I know that many of you, when I taught high school, it didn't take me really long when I was teaching my students to go, half the class is smarter than me. Okay. Nothing will make you feel inadequate than when you're like 30 and a 13-year-old is like 4 times smarter than you are. But I know that that's true tonight, and I know that you probably have information that I don't. But our field of psychology, we can really only do some of our genetic research on cadavers. And so we haven't progressed very far in terms of understanding a lot of the biology, the physiology, and around genetics, and how that influences our mental health. The biggest advance that we've had in this area is that we can do DNA testing for psychotropic medications. And we now know it's very expensive, unless you have insurance, and even then it's very expensive, that you can get a little swab, a DNA test, and we can tell you certain classifications of medications that will not, no matter how much you take, they will not help you with your depression or your anxiety. Yet these classifications of medications would help you. That has moved to light years, but we still have a long way to go. Your disposition and temperament, you were just kind of born that way. That's just how you are. I've got 2 boys. My oldest kind of came out of the womb perfect, and my youngest came out of the womb, let's just say he's special. We did the same things, but they were just born differently. Your worldview based on your experiences, and obviously we talked about the biological makeup. So our mental health, 4 general areas influence that. Family. What's the makeup of your family? My family was my mom and me. For some of you, more and more, this whole notion, and this isn't good, you're probably like, what are you talking about? This dad who goes out to work, and mom stays home, wears an apron, bakes chocolate chip cookies, Nestle Toll House while the 2.4789 kids go to school. They come home, the milk is delivered in a glass bottle out of the milkman, white suit, and they all just sit around and have baked chicken and beans and peas and mashed potatoes at night. Like, that's less than like 4% of people in our country today. So what is family? Family is whatever you grew up in. Who are the people who are around you? And for many of you, I would suspect, family were people who you might not have even been biologically related to. Family, for a lot of young people I work with, they will say in a heartbeat that their friends are they consider their friends to be much more of a family to them than they do the family that they were born into. How did you interact? Communication. All of these things affect our mental health. Safety, not just physical safety, although that's important, but emotional safety. Was home an emotionally safe place, or was it always like walking around on eggshells? One of the most humiliating and painful days of my life was when my wife had to come to me one day, about 5 years ago, when my depression was really out of hand, and I wasn't helping it with alcohol, and just say, we can't live like this anymore. I don't know what's going on, but the last 5 months, like, your two precious boys, who you consider the most important people in your life, we all feel like we're walking on eggshells around you. That there's anything that we can do. My house wasn't an emotionally safe place. And that affects people. Thank God we turned it around. Our psychology, how resilient are we to certain stressors? Our mental health, attachment, were you really connected with your primary caregivers? A lot of good research is coming out in this area right now in and around attachment. What beliefs did you create about the world and about other people? Was the world a good place? Was the world a place that had opportunity for you? Was the world a safe place? Was the world hostile? Were people something to be feared, or were people who were going to cheat you and take advantage of you? Were people good? Relationships, media, school, church, culture, time, obviously society. Media is a huge influence today just because of the time displacement of how much time we're in media. Now again, to be fair, in relationship with people on media a lot of the time, but media is a huge influence. Biology, exercise, diet, obviously genetics, and certain illnesses, even physical illnesses that irrespective of mental health can affect it. So let's just talk just a little bit real quick about the young adult brain. I want to move on because we did get a late start. I want to move on. So let's just talk, not as much as when you were in high school, but still undergoing some structural changes, right? The brain is still growing, it's still expanding. It's always, we know about the plasticity of the brain, that it can withstand a lot, but it's still growing, that's important. And that growth, the rapid expansion, can affect how the neurotransmitters in the brain, and those neurotransmitters, there's three primarily that are going to govern, but there's thousands of neurotransmitters, maybe even more, right? But norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin, those are the two biggies, dopamine, serotonin. We tweak your dopamine levels, we tweak your serotonin levels, which you can do on your own with substances, legal or otherwise. That can affect your mood. Synaptic pruning, myelination, the corpus callosum thickens, between the two hemispheres of the brain, allowing you to process information in both artistic and logical, systematic ways. And it's more than hormonal. And I hate it when people just call teenagers hormonal. We're all hormonal. I hate it when people pick on women and teenagers for being hormonal. Like, men have a cycle too. Like, every 7 days, I am hormonal. It's true. That's good science. The prefrontal cortex, until you're about 25, 26, 27, hasn't fully come online, and that's important in governing mood because the prefrontal cortex is the filter for stuff coming in, like what people say about you, what you're reading, what you're learning, your life experiences, but it's also the filter for stuff coming out. And so before that really gets fully developed, the amygdala, that emotional hot seat of the brain, that's right, that's ready to go. And so you can get really hot and emotional because there's nothing to filter life, other people, social media, whatever, from coming in and pinging the amygdala, and then there's really nothing to buffer it going out either. Continued new growth. Can you see, just based on some of the science, how hard sometimes mood stability can be until you're in your mid to late 20s? It can really be tough. And that's on a level playing field. That's on a level playing field. So let's, true or false, Hopefully this isn't too kiddie for you, but the subject certainly isn't kiddie. 4 out of 5 teens and young adults, this research is 12 to 25 years old, who attempt suicide have given clear warning signs. Good, yeah, true. Absolutely. You know, like, seriously, are you testing us? Like, do you know where you are? You know what time of year it is? Come on, guys, really? We can tell you're from the swamp. Do you take a P road to work? Depression increases the risk of suicide by 12 times. Absolutely true. Yeah, absolutely true. Suicide is the 4th leading cause of death in adolescents and young adults today. False. It's the number 2 leading cause of death. Some research I have found would conclusively show that amongst college-age freshmen, it is the number 1 cause of death. It is the number 1 cause of death. And I know some of you are asking, because I get asked this a lot, and I know we'll get a room full of smart people here today. What is the number 1 cause of death? It's accidents, and in that category, the biggest one is motor vehicle accidents. In 2014, suicide surpassed motor vehicle accidents for adolescents and young adults, being a bigger cause of death. So it's really relevant and prevalent. I don't have to tell you that. You know it. Interesting where the suicide rates are highest in our country today. Montana is currently leading the pack. It used to be Alaska and these western rural states. I was just in Alaska, and I just think that they should have, it amazed me people in Alaska, it would amaze me people here who don't supplement with vitamin D3. If you at all possibly can get a blood test and get your blood work done, we'll talk more about this later, but the E vitamins and the D vitamins, especially vitamin D3, affect mood. Anyone north of Louisiana should supplement should consider and be tested to supplement for vitamin D3. I take 5,000 IUs a day, and I live in one of the sunniest states in the country. Just to say, people in Alaska are like, seriously, you think we should take D3? I said, you should have it on a mist in every building you walk into in Alaska. Like, seriously? Man, they should sell it by the nightshade curtains that they do in the summer. Go ahead and pick up your D3 for winter. Talking about suicide causes people to consider suicide. True or false? Yeah, that's a tough one, right? That's a tough one, especially if you've been paying attention to the news in the last year or so, because this is talked about a lot. That is absolutely false. What's happened, and this is perhaps the worst problem that we have around suicide in our country today, is that a misunderstanding of the mimetic principle, coming from the word mime, or the contagion principle, which we know for a fact, we've got hard, conclusive research, which is sometimes hard to come by in the social sciences, but we've got hard research to prove that if there is a suicide in let's say a school, high school, or let's say in your math class, that everyone now in that room, right, who knew that person is now at risk. And that's the contagion principle. And because we know that it can catch fire like that, we saw it with self-injurious behavior and cutting in about 2002, 2003. It didn't happen all that much, and then as it began to happen, it was just like, wow, now we're at probably 25% of youth and young adults at some point have cut, carved, burned, or hurt themselves in order to feel better. Suicide, we're in the full-blown contagion effect. I hope we are. Some suggest that we haven't even gotten there yet. Talking about suicide like we're doing tonight, with a couple of very important caveats, meaning that we don't want to romanticize it. We don't want to, nor do we want to overly romanticize or eulogize the person necessarily who completed a suicide, nor do we want to graphically portray or talk about the means of suicide. With those two and maybe a couple of other exceptions, this not only doesn't cause it, but it actually helps it. It's almost like a tiny pinprick in the suicide depression balloon. It just lets the air out of it, the more it can be talked about. That which is hidden, this is true in most areas of life that I've learned. That which goes untalked about controls the relationship with yourself, with other people. When we talk about it, it loses its power. Suicide is no exception, so talking helps. Many people who contemplate suicide want to talk about it, although they may not initiate the conversation. Notice it didn't say all, but many. Because I know some of you, and I know people who certainly do not want to talk about it, but many people do. They just don't want to initiate it because it's awkward. And to talk about something, again, to go back to by God's given language, when we talk about it and we hear ourselves say it, it becomes real. And when something becomes real, we feel like we have to do something about it. And so the longer we don't talk about it or write it, more teens and young adults, this is absolutely true, die from all these diseases combined. Most people who contemplate suicide had an untreatable mental illness. Absolutely false. 90% of people who complete suicide had a very treatable mental illness, but they didn't get help. For a bunch of reasons, perhaps. They didn't see the signs in themselves. They didn't know where to get help. People didn't help them. Whites and Hispanics have the highest rates of suicide. False. It's actually whites and Native Americans and First Nation Americans have the highest rates of suicide in our country. Today's youth and young adults are more stressed than adults. Absolutely true. Too much stress can lead to anxiety and depression. I kind of give that one away. True, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's exhausting being worried and stressed. And we'll talk about stress a little bit. Anxiety is the second most commonly diagnosed mental health condition in our country today. Trick question. We'll go back to the swamp, big guy. What's the trick question? It's false. It's actually the number one mental health concern in our country today, anxiety is. It's the most commonly diagnosed mental health condition across the lifespan. Self-injury is a precursor to suicide. True or false? True, right? And again, I picked these questions like the terrible teacher because they're so counterintuitive, right? False. 98.4% of the time pain because there's a part of the brain, the anterior cingulate cortex, that it's one of three main pain receptors in the brain, and when it cannot differentiate physical and emotional pain. So let's say you have a breakup or a relationship where someone really close to you dies, that's emotional pain, right? Well, the brain's main activity, main purpose is to suppress distraction, which it cannot do effectively in the ADHD brain, but to suppress pain. So when you get hurt, even though it doesn't feel like it, your brain is sending chemicals to suppress that pain, but it doesn't differentiate it. So if you hit yourself in the head, right, and you're also stressed, the brain will send out chemicals to not only relieve this, but also to relieve this as well. And so that's why it can be addictive to self-injurious behavior. Eating disorders, 1 in 4 adolescent girls, but 1 in 6 adolescent boys. And adolescent really, I went back to put young adults, but I want you to know this research is, adolescence in clinical studies is defined up until about the age of 25. And it's the full terminal growth of the brain, at least structurally. So why are more youth and young adults hurting today? Political climate. This stresses me out just looking at this damn photo. Terror and violence, so more of that. Relationships, they're complex. They're online, they're constantly happening through media. Uncertainty of future. I've walked with 3 young adults in here today, and I wanted to ask both of them about one of them was graduating, but I knew better than to ask what you're doing after graduation because I didn't want to have to go into a panic attack. I don't know. What are you, my father? This is huge. Undefined success. Many of you know, I would like you to just give this some thought after tonight. How do you define success? What does it mean for you to be successful? Many young people, as you can see when we get to the anxiety slides, are working on an outdated definition of success, as are their parents, right? Which means get really good grades so that you can do really well on a couple of outdated, outmoded, standardized tests that will govern your ability to be able to get into a really good college. And if you get into said really good college and do really well, you might be able to fork out another 6 figures to get into another really good college. And then after that, you can get a really good job, which will help you pay off the $250,000 of debt that you've got from those 2 schools and living expenses. And then you can amass a lot of money, and then you will be happy. But I've had billionaires sit on the couch who were a quarter of an inch from taking their life. Money, financial and what some might call worldly success does not necessarily equate happiness. Success, the best definition I've ever heard is, by Napoleon Hill, is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. The progressive realization of a worthy goal. Now, who gets to decide what's worthy? You do, right? Why is this important? Because how much hope might it take from me, assuming that I have hope to begin with, if I can see myself going on a pattern in my life that is not aligned with how I define success? This is what success is supposed to be, but I'm going over here. Well, that's depressing. How do you define success? Your parents, a lot of you, never allowed you to fail. They came in and rescued you and made the way for you. When I say this to teenagers across the country, the heads nod like they're bobbing for apples. It's an old game we used to play on Halloween, by the way. Nobody does it anymore. I'm so sorry, no kidding. You just see them kind of head bobbing, right? They're like, they know, and they're looking at their parents. Yeah, you should have let me fail. Why'd you have to, go and argue with the coach and get in a fist fight and get a restraining order? He was just going to bench me for 2 games. Get over it. Golly, you're aware embarrassment. I'm going to be in therapy for how you acted at the baseball game, not for getting seated. More than 50% of youth and young adults report being in unhealthy and near abusive relationships. We don't play anymore. I mean, I'd love to know how many of you played as kids. Like, how many of your parents just made you go outside and play? Notice those kids don't have shoes on. When was the last time you walked barefoot in the grass? Research grounding. This beautiful earth that we get to live on is filled with negatively charged ions that heal our body without us doing anything by just coming into contact with it. But most of you, like me, we spend our day in shoes on cement, under artificial lighting, in front of the screen with artificial lighting, and we're not coming into contact with nature, which can help regulate some of our metabolic processes, including some of our neurological processes. Insufficient resources, busy, social media, fear of missing out on social media. And this is from a college freshman. I don't think we realize how much it's affecting our moods and personalities. Media is a tool, but it's become this thing we can't live without. But it's making us crazy. So what is stress? Here's Wikipedia's definition of stress. Pressure or tension, blah, blah, blah. Here's Petitfils' definition of stress. The feeling you get when you feel unable to meet expectations. Now, your perception of those expectations. Objectively, those expectations might not be there, but if you perceive them to be there, and you perceive that you don't have it within you to meet those, that is stress. Now, stress can be good and bad, right? Good stress. There can be good stress, and there can be bad stress. Prolonged chronic stress is the type of stress that can be really, really unhealthy. Now, what is anxiety? Anxiety, very simple, right? And I'm going to give you my simple definition of it. It's taking ambiguous data, right? Which for many young people and young adults today can just be nonverbal behavior. Every day I see the young adults in my practice. Sometimes it's not that they're misinterpreting it, they just don't know how to interpret the nonverbals because they have become experts at interpreting data that comes through a screen. Whether it's nonverbal, verbal, text, or otherwise, they've gotten less proficient at interpreting nonverbals, and so ambiguous data, and drawing from the ambiguous data the absolute worst possible conclusions. Well, they didn't smile at me. Okay, well, what did that mean for you? Well, they must hate me. Okay, all right, are there any other possible explanations? Absolutely not. Well, we've just catastrophized. So anxiety wants to generalize, it wants to say a very specific instance, because she gave me the dirty look, all of my friends now hate me. Now that may be true, but let's not base it just on that one specific instance. It catastrophizes, and then it nebulizes. It takes these worst possible case scenarios and it explodes them into 1,000 parts. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, especially mental OCD, does that. On like steroids. It's one of my clients described it. It was like being in a room with 1,000 ceiling fans, and each one of your thought is a blade on those ceiling fans, and they're spinning at full tilt. Anxiety and OCD are related. For those of you who are psych majors in here, I know that technically we pulled OCD out of the anxiety disorders in our diagnostic manual, but there's still a lot of overlap. I had major obsessive compulsive disorder behaviors as a kid, and I don't really have OCD to this day. I skipped cracks in the sidewalks. I would have to flip the light switches on in the house 5 times. When my mom made me go to church all the time, when I walked in, I'd have to trace my finger around all of the pews. I would have diagnosed me with OCD, but those compulsions were anxiety-driven. So anxiety types, here are the different types of anxiety. Generalized, social, separation, obviously trauma, post-traumatic. Agoraphobia is when anxiety has gotten so bad, like I don't want to go out in public because I'm afraid I might have a panic attack and wouldn't want to get out. If you're in this room and you're seated in this area and you've got agoraphobia, you need to pat yourself on the back. You have really overcome a lot. Someone with agoraphobia would be sitting there. Most folks today with agoraphobia are going to be sitting somewhere where they can watch it coming through the live stream. They wouldn't want to be in here. Specific phobias, like with bald people. Stress synonyms. So when we're stressed, we'll say I'm pressured, worried, nervous, overloaded, anxious, overwhelmed. What does it sound like? I just can't take the pressure anymore, Mr. P. I can't be perfect. I just wish people would understand that. 16-year-old boy with generalized anxiety disorder, stomach ulcers, and premature hair graying. Stress. When does stress become a problem? When irritability comes from a difficulty falling asleep. Short-term insomnia, for those of you who are psych nerds like me. Self-injurious behavior, certainly depression, suicidal thoughts. Apathy. I used to care, but I don't care anymore. Dishonesty is a problem. I can't put another thing on my plate, it's overflowing, and they're all good things, but they're stressing me out. Obsessions, counting, hand washing, lock checking, needing constant reassurance, perfectionism, all of these things. So what are some of the causes of anxiety? Genetics, over-involvement. We're going to talk about that tonight. It's hard for me to say no. And I know it's hard for you to say no, but we get over-involved. Most of our parents did not do a good job of modeling that for us. They led us to believe by traipsing the family around for 49 or 52 weekends a year, doing constant sports and never having a weekend at home, that we could do everything. That's a lie. You cannot do everything and be mentally healthy. At least that's my opinion. Chronic stress. A lot of my gamers experience constant stress and present with PTSD symptomology because they are gaming, and I'm not going to mention any games, Fortnite, but some of their games can produce, it puts them into fight-flight mode. Now, that's a great mode for you to be in, like when you need to run away from a lion at the Chicago Zoo. That's great, and we need to be able to access that mode. We were not designed to live in it. Unrealistic expectations, when the adults in your life haven't allowed you to fail, it's really hard for you to be able to feel like you're going to be able to make it in life because you know damn good and well that failure is a part of it, and you didn't learn when you were younger and when there were support systems around you, namely your family, to help you learn how to navigate it. And so it comes from a degree of self-efficacy. So one of my recommendations to you tonight is actively seek out ways that you can fail safely. Find some safe ways that you can fail, and before going into it, even find ways to overcome it. So anxiety, I'm going to move through this. I want to get. So what does anxiety sound like? If you only know how much pressure is on me to get into a good college, I know it means everything in my future, but at this rate, I may not even be around in the future. She only made a 30 on the ACT. Wait for it. Heard this a year and a half ago. I only made a 35 on the ACT. But this was real for this kid. I dreamed of my whole life of going to MIT. That's a little school in Boston. And now, I don't know, I feel hopeless. And he really was hopeless because that's what he had dreamed of his whole life. A school that almost nobody in the world gets into. My parents think I don't care, but I do care. I'm just scared. I have no idea what I want to do for the rest of my life. I don't even know I'm going to pass my finals. And one of you are like, you just read my mind. Yeah. Right? So depression. What does it sound like? If you only knew how dark it is in here. This young woman told me, I can't remember the last time I could see any light that I felt happy. I forgot what it's like to be happy, to look forward to stuff. This grad student said, I haven't wanted anything, I wanted to do anything in months. Ding, ding, ding. I hear this a lot. I can tell my friends are at their limit with me. They don't know what to do or say. They've said it all. Nothing seems to help. I can tell when I'm around them that I'm bumming them out. I cannot fix this. So depression is a serious mental health problem. Persistent feelings of sadness, worthlessness, hopelessness that last for 2 weeks or more. If you're into one of these for a couple, you could be sad. Yeah, can you be sad for a few days? Can you have a depression for a few days? It's not chronicle. But if it's lasting for a couple of weeks or more, some would say even less than that, you've got a tiger by the tail, and it's something that needs to be looked at. It's not the same as, but could be a part of bipolar disorder. Everyone wants to talk about bipolar. Bipolar is not your moody friend. They may be bipolar, but their moodiness does not make them bipolar. If you've ever met someone who is having a hypomanic, which means a less than full-blown manic episode, you will know that bipolar disorder is not a moodiness. Mania and hypomania leave a wake of personal and collateral destruction in their path. It is ugly. It ruins lives, it ruins families. And there are different two types of bipolar disorder. One doesn't present with mania. This normally doesn't show up until college. Bipolar rarely presents itself sooner than the late teen years. It's not always happy or elevated mood. Mania in older teens can be irritable, sleepless, risk-taking, and destructive behaviors. It has a depressive component to it. It certainly does. But it's not normal adolescent or young adult moodiness. So 3 types of depression, right? Unipolar, which is what we talk about when we say depression. Bipolar. And this third one, and this is another reason that it's good that we're here tonight, this one rarely gets diagnosed in most people, and it's dysthymia. If depression looks like this, dysthymia looks like this. It never gets bad enough to where we do anything about it, or it rarely does. It's only the chronicity of it, and I know that's not a word, it's chronic nature, right? In Louisiana, we make up words. It's our gift to the U.S. But it's how chronic it is that can make it really a problem. So these symptoms that we're about to look at, I don't know do I know if it's depression or just sadness. How severe is it? How sudden did it come about? And how frequent are you experiencing it? Sadness, irritability, withdrawal, isolation. It's huge. You know, it was harder when you lived at home or you lived with other people, even if you live in community now, to isolate. It's much easier to isolate now that you're in college, depending upon where you live, and now that you're older and you're a young adult. And so it's harder to help college students in many ways because you're an adult and because you have the ability to be able to isolate and run from it. I know because I'm a pro at it. I'm still a pro at it. My wife chases me down though. Decreased academic performance, your grades falling, loss of interest, substance use. Are your friends asking you more than for a month, hey, is everything okay? You need to pay attention to that. Is your sleep all jacked up? Yes, I know because you're in college, your sleep is jacked up, right? I get that in general. Finals are coming up. But in general, appetite, increase of appetite, loss of appetite. Aggression, recklessness, illegal activity, obviously suicidal thought, concerned friends. So the causes, a lot like anxiety, suicide. What does suicide sound like? If I knew that I could go to sleep tonight and not wake up tomorrow, that would give me hope. Many people would not consider this young woman to be suicidal. However, I read that is what we call in the biz a passive suicidal ideation. She doesn't have a plan. At this point, I asked her directly, do you want to kill yourself? And she said, no, I don't want to kill myself. But she followed up and said, if I were driving my car and someone hit me on the blood side and I died, that wouldn't be such a bad thing. That's a problem. That's a problem because that is about an inch away from right? If things don't get better, that will turn into what you might hear some folks say, an active ideation, which would be, I do want to take my life, whether you have a plan or not. I'm bored with this life, I want a new one. I thought when I took those pills, it would be like exchanging this life for another one, kind of like I did my shoes at Target. my shoe to talk. Mr. P, can you honestly tell me that as you look out at this world today, it doesn't scare you out of you? Why would I want to hang around for that? I know my life is made up of moments, but right now there's just too many moments, and none of them are any good. If I could just make it to where there were no more moments. So what are some of the risk factors? Family history of depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, any sort of mental health history. Exposure to suicide. This puts you at risk. Previous attempts. If you've attempted, has someone close to you attempted suicide? And thank God that it wasn't successful. Previous attempts, certainly. A history. Do you have a history of anxiety or depression? Like, I am at risk for suicide. I have a severe history of depression, going back to my teen years. Substance abuse puts you at risk. I know that's not something you want to hear, but it does. You know, my teens are jealous because I travel all the time and I'm always in weed legal states, and they're like, dude, that's so awesome. Like, could you bring me back some gummies? And I was like, look, I could have a whole house full of THC in Louisiana. My brother-in-law owns a farm outside of Denver, right? I know with the certainty that I cannot grow hair on this part of my head that would kill me. I know that it would kill me. I know what alcohol can do. I certainly know what it can do, because they both affect dopamine levels. And about 17% of the population, THC is addictive, by the way. Go and do the research. I know that a lot of folks like to say it's not. I'm not here to bash it. In fact, I will say that a lot of the research on psychedelics and on THC, CBD oil is about as good as we can get right now, but we haven't been able to isolate those cannabinoids yet without the side effects, right? And so we need more research on it. There is good in it. There is good in it. I'm not here to bash it. But right now there's a lot of trash that comes along with it too. And it's like taking a shop vac to your drive. Like, well, I wanted to be successful, you know, and then, I don't know, things just kind of went downhill. Well, when did you start smoking? Well, I guess about a year ago. When did things start going downhill? You bastard. Okay. Just saying. It's a correlation. I'm not saying it's causal. If you were adopted, you know, if you lived in a foster home, this doesn't mean your life is destined to be crap, right, or be depressed. It just means that you're at risk, right? If you're bullied, if you find yourself identifying on the continuum, and I know it's not a continuum, I don't really know how to say it, but anywhere in the spectrum, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer questioning, and other, right? Because of the bullying, because of the fact that in so many areas of the lack of acceptance, that puts you at risk. The suicide rate for young people, for adolescents in that area is 10 times higher than the normal population. It's real, and it's unfortunate, because there's things that we should be able to do with people. The most civilized, the most advanced civilization in the world, and we can't figure out a way to be decent to one another. Of course, our political leaders can't seem to figure out how to do that either, but nonetheless. If you are impulsive, if I've got a male, and this isn't, because I know women can be impulsive as well, who's got access to guns, right, is proficient with access to guns, has a history of depression, and is impulsive, I'm looking at his parents in the face, and I'm saying, this is a potential problem. If there's more risk factors, it's almost like an accident waiting to happen. Especially, and I'm saying, if there's a history, a mental health history there. Access to lethal means, there's trauma. So what are the warning signs? A lot of these warning signs are, in and of themselves, they aren't going to look like much, but they're important when they overlap, and if they're drastic, if they're consistent or intense, right? So they fall into 6 categories. American Society for Suicide Prevention offers us these 6 categories to look out for. Please, if you guys need to go, I know we started late, and I know, but we are going to open it up. You're not going to offend me. I've been married for 17 years. You cannot offend me. If you need to go, go. If you got to go pee, go pee. Do what you got to do. Smoke, right, rocket. Do what you need to do. So if someone you know says, you know, I'm just such a burden, that's a warning sign. I feel trapped. Right? I feel trapped, especially in a relationship. By the way, let me just say it to you, because it breaks my heart, because I see it, how abusive it is. If you tell someone you're in a committed relationship to, a romantic relationship, I don't know the politically correct word to say it, if you're dating, talking, whatever. If you tell them that if they break up with you, you're going to kill yourself, that's abusive. I don't know what your moral ethic is. I'm just here today to tell you that that's abusive. You have put that other person in a bind. You have put them in a special type of hell, the likes of which you cannot imagine, regardless of how bad you feel. That's abusive. Please don't do that. Tell someone else that, maybe, but don't tell that other person that, because they will stay in that relationship, and now we will have two people. Instead of one person drowning in the pool, now we're going to have two. I can't take the pain anymore. I have no reason to live. I think I might kill myself. All warning signs. These are all things we need to pay attention to. If you hear yourself saying these things, if your friends are saying that, increased use of alcohol, looking for ways, searching online, what's the best way to take one's life, acting recklessly, withdrawing, I know a lot of repetition, isolating, sleeping, saying goodbye, giving away prized possessions, aggressive behavior. Mood, again, depression or anxiety. These are warning signs we've got to pay attention to. Loss of interest, rage. Not just anger and irritability, but like rage. Irritability, humiliation, something especially humiliating. That's something I pay attention to. That's an emotion, that and embarrassment are emotions that most people will almost never really admit to another person. We'll all talk about our funny, most embarrassing moment, like when my mother-in-law saw me naked when my wife and I were first married. Like, that one's funny. But the most embarrassing moment that I never really want to talk about, where I was humiliated, was in 10th grade, and I was picking my nose because I just was, I just didn't have manners and any social skills. And my whole class went around spreading school that I was eating my boogers. And in addition to being poor, fat, and thinking I was stupid at the bottom of my class, now people were walking around calling me a boogerator. I literally went home that night and for the first time seriously contemplated suicide. It's humiliating. And now, thank God, that there was not social media when I was in high school. I don't know that I would be here today. It was bad enough in person, I can't imagine online. It breaks my heart when somebody criticizes me. It happens a lot online, much less getting bullied there. So depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, certainly. Borderline personality disorder, for sure. Antisocial personality disorder. I'm not going to go into what those things are. You can certainly Google that. And I know some of you already are on it. Good, awesome. Chronic illness. So if there's chronic illness for you or a loved one, or a significant handicap, I've seen major depression as a result of a college athlete. I mean, college athlete, high school athlete, especially for a college athlete whose scholarship was based on her ability to play softball. She gets injured, isn't able to play, can't go to school. So chronic illness, severe injury, hormonal, thyroid issues. Cyclothymia is low-grade bipolar disorder, what dysthymia is to depression. Substance abuse, conduct disorder. Environmental, stressful life events, prolonged stress factors, bullying, access to lethal means, exposure to another person's suicide. Especially someone you know, exposure to graphic, sensationalized accounts of suicide, which was my big concern about 13 Reasons Why when it came out, as popular as I know it was. And it's so much good that really did come from it, was the graphic nature of the suicide. The research on that is clear. And I know many of you can argue to me, and maybe even effectively, that it wasn't graphic to you. It was graphic to many. I think that there was a lot of good that actually came out of it. Honestly, I think it got us talking about it. It brought the topic to the forefront. We'll see what happens. I fully expect in the next 6 weeks, season 2 to be coming out. Physical violence, historical previous attempts, family history. Did someone in your family, did one of your parents do it? Grandparents, suicide attempts, mental illness, violent behavior. Now we're done. All right, so what else? Medication and counseling. Either one of those can help independently, but when they go together, we know the research shows incredibly effective. Mark Nepo wrote a book called 7,000 Ways to Listen. There's 7,000 languages and dialect in our world. Can there not also be 7,000 ways to listen? To find someone who can listen to you. We're not a good culture of listening to one another. Your friend cannot be your therapist. You can help them and you can be a good listener, but if you're in a friendship and you're in a therapist role, you're going to start pulling out of that friendship because you're not getting paid. Sometimes I want to pull out of the role and I get paid well to do it. You're sure as hell not going to do it when it's your friend. You need to go get some help. Hell, I'm going to pay for you to go. How much does it cost? When we listen, can we listen to understand or do we listen to fix? Most people don't want advice. Most people think they come to counseling for advice. 99% of the time my mouth is closed in my office. The other 0.7%, I'm asking questions, and only in that little microscopic 0.3% am I actually. And then I ask permission. I was like, well, do you want any feedback on that? But most of the time, folks really don't want it. But a lot of adults, it's true, we love to hear ourselves say things that sound really profound, whether they're landing well with the other person or not. So we listen to understand, connect, and to heal. Listening, most of the value, we know this now, 90% of the value from counseling and psychotherapy comes from the connection in the psychotherapeutic relationship. If you don't feel connected to the counselor, if you have other options, seek them out. If you don't have any other options, make do with what you got. But the most effect comes from being able to connect and having someone listen. We know that with trauma. Right? Trauma, someone defined trauma, to me, my favorite is the lack of an empathic witness to your pain. The lack of an empathic witness to your pain. Someone who, did you have someone who saw how much you were hurting and who got it? That we know can actually heal the brain and rewire the brain. People will forget what you tell them, but they'll never forget how you listen. Exercise. 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 Did I mention exercise yet? Did I mention that exercise is the best natural antidepressant on the market? Right? What exercise can do and what it does to the human brain, even going for a walk, what the sunshine can do. What you can do walking on grass barefoot in the sunshine can do. What you can do on the elliptical to heal it. I got off the plane at 12:43. I thought Rebecca was coming to pick me up at 3 o'clock. So I rushed into the gym today, and for 18 minutes in my hotel, I got on the elliptical bike. Not because I'm trying to shed weight or because I want to go check out the fancy gym equipment, but I know that if I don't do that 5 days a week, next week is going to be a train wreck for me. If I go without a week of exercise, next week will be a train wreck for my family. If I go another week, it'll be a train wreck for my business. Exercise. All right, prioritization. Prioritizing, time management, list making. If I know that this is not, I just have to say it in hopes that in the next 3 to 5 years you will get this book. It's a book called Getting Things Done. David Allen wrote this book called Getting Things Done, and I would say he's a prophet for the world of work in the 21st century. Most of you, I would bet, work on a screen like this most of the time, right? We know based on research that you would be more than twice as much effective if you had dual screens and dual monitors. You would go up even more if you had a third monitor, but you're working on a little bitty laptop, and most of the work that you're doing is on a screen, and yet we're doing it on these little bitty screens, right? And the next thing is that your teachers, your professors' life is presenting you with fewer tests and more projects. And so you learned in most of your high schools how to manage and learn how to hack a test, but how to move through a project that's got lots of moving parts. And so one of the things that stresses most of my clients out is they cannot answer this question. Well, I got this big test. What's the very next thing you need to do? Oh, I need to study. Well, what the hell does that mean? So, all right, if you just go home, what are you going to do? Start studying. Oh, I'm going to start studying. Oh, what does that mean? I don't know what start studying looks like. I'm going to go get my book. Good. Then what's the next thing you're going to do? I'm going to open the damn book. Okay, great. And then what? Well, I'm going to start studying. Well, what does that mean? Are you going to just read? Are you going to read what you highlighted? Like, what's the very next thing? This thing, you think I'm crazy, and you're right. You're right. But your inability to answer that question will create procrastination on every level of your life. What's the very next thing that I need to do? When you're stuck, it's because you cannot answer that question. Most of anxiety comes as a result of not being able to answer that question. Especially if you're an undergrad, if you can't figure out the answer to that, get help. Go to the counseling center, get someone to help you come up with a step-by-step plan of actionable steps. Project planning, if you're into projects, right? Outcome visioning, what's the ideal outcome? You're in school right now, right? Not what your parents' ideal outcome is for you, because that's a 4-0, right? Right? That's what their ideal outcome is. What's your ideal outcome? And own it. Is it a 3-0? Is it to not get kicked out? What's your ideal outcome? Brainstorming, using multiple colors, whiteboards, graph paper, using your non-dominant hand to brainstorm, right? All of these things help. Organizing data and resources, next actions and timeline. Who's responsible for what? If you're working on a project with other people, 4 other people your age, and you have a meeting and you walk away not knowing, you make damn sure that you know who's responsible for what part of the project before you guys leave the coffee shop. Because that's the world of work you're going into. That's the world of work you're going into. How do I know what's the next step? What's the context? Right? Well, I can't read if I'm driving. Okay? Well, what can you do? Can you listen to the recording of the class? Right? How much time and energy do you have available? If you guys want the PowerPoint, you can have it. Anxiety mapping. What's the worst thing that can happen? Answers that question. Facing your fears, meditation, prayer, some sort of spiritual practice. This is based on research. We know that that's true. Did I mention exercise? Facing your fears. Journaling. I would say when I worked with more adults, half of them could stop counseling if they journaled every day. Because really, they're articulating their thoughts there. They could do it verbally, but they could have done it in writing as well. Sleep. Screen limits. I get depressed on Facebook. I mean, I was on it when I was waiting for my ride to come over here. I was on it, and I was like, I'm getting fucking depressed. There it is, because I'm jealous. Yeah, everyone looks like they got their shit together on Facebook and on Instagram and on Snapchat, right? Nobody puts their dirty laundry and their embarrassing stuff up on there. Yeah, my kid got kicked out of school today because he dog cussed the teacher. Said no one on Facebook ever. We will only put non-perfect pictures of ourselves on Instagram and on Snapchat if they're funny. But we're not going to put something deliberately on, and if we do, it's a cry for help, right? Routine helps. Tuning out negativity, tuning out negative people, square breathing. And those are just a few things that help. I want to at least take 15 minutes for questions and open it up because I know that there's a bunch of questions. I'll give you some ways to get in touch with me. You can also leave too if you want, but I'll hang out. I know there's big questions. So.